Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 324. We're back today for another Rut Fresh Radio episode in which we're getting the latest late season intel on current conditions, deer activity, and how to fill a tag right now. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by something by Onyx. We are here. Onyx is helping. Spencer's with me too. And we are actually recording the introduction of this episode of Rut Fresh Radio in Montana together. I'm looking at Spencer's beautiful blue eyes right in front of me, the burly man beard, the big deep voice himself in the flesh. It's quite a privilege.
Never been done before, I think, with Rut Fresh in person.
No, I think you're right. Like I said, we are here for the Rut Fresh Radio edition of Wired to Hunt, in which we are going to be hearing from a group of hunters from across the country to get the latest on deer activity, on how conditions are impacting deer and deer hunting right now this week, and tactics and ideas for getting it done over the coming days. The hunting season is approaching the end, so you might be feeling the pressure. Got to fill that freezer with the remaining days on the calendar, and we're here to try to help you do that. Now, I got to bring something to everyone's attention, it's much more fun to do this with Spencer here in person. I got an email the other day. It was either an email or a review. I can't remember where I saw it, but somebody said, Spencer Newharth is the worst co-host because he's obviously faking his voice. There's no way he really sounds like that in person. He's trying too hard. He's a fraud. Get him off the show. So I just need to let everybody know. Well, we actually have a third person in the studio with us today. Special guest appearance on Rut Fresh Radio. Someone who you might have heard on the Meat Eater podcast. You might have heard on the Hunting Collective podcast. We got Phil, the audio engineer, helping us out here today. Phil, can you help us shine some light on the truth of Spencer's voice?
Well, it's pretty simple. That's what he sounds like.
And there's no audio magic. There's no.
I don't do any manipulation. I don't think you do either.
No.
No. That's what comes out of his mouth.
How do you feel about that? Does he sound unbelievable? Does he sound impossibly deep and mellow and sensual to you?
He does, but that's not a bad thing. I don't know.
No, I agree.
You know, it's like something I've been actually conscious of. I remember in high school, there was this girl from my high school that was dating a guy from a different school. And like we had a lot of reasons to dislike him, but one of them was that it seemed like he was trying really hard to make his voice deep. And so if we were like to list off things why we didn't like this person, be like, oof. And he like tries to make his voice sound really deep. And so since then, I've been conscious of like having that not be something that someone tries to call me out for.
Right.
Like really trying to be a tough guy and trying to deepen my voice.
You don't want to be the pot calling the kettle black.
That's right. I don't. I think back to that often.
Well, there's this thing. I got criticized for this too. We were talking about this last night. There's this, I don't even really know how to describe it, but some type of way that people talk that's been labeled as called vocal fry. I don't know how to describe it. Some certain way people intonate or whatever. And someone also harassed me about doing that. So both of our voices have been underneath the spotlight lately. I don't know what to tell you. There's nothing I can do. We can't change it. But I do wonder. I have theorized. I've been curious. Are you familiar with the story of Samson? It's a biblical story, long hair Samson, and when they cut his hair, he lost all of his superhuman powers. Mm-hmm. Well, I've often wondered, if Spencer shaved off his beard, would he lose his deep man voice?
Let's not find out.
Phil, what's your guess?
Yeah, well, I had to grow a bad mustache for Ben's show, so I think it's only fair that Spencer has to shave his beard for Mark's show.
I think that's a good idea.
No, I haven't seen my chin in like 4 years. Don't plan on it.
I guess we'll never find out then.
No,
that's right.
We'll have to find some way to make this happen over the coming years. So I'm going to do some thinking on it. But with that out of the way, we do want to talk about deer. We do want to talk about deer hunting. we've got a whole bunch of people that have reports on what's been going on in the woods over the last 7 days or so. I've got a couple small updates on my end in Michigan, Spencer. Do you want to hear about that at all?
Yes.
Okay, quick update is that there are still some decent bucks moving around in pockets of sanctuary cover. There's a little zone on one of the properties I hunt where there's still 2 mature bucks moving in daylight. I saw Tran the other day when glassing from my little hillside spying location on him. I saw him. He's still alive. And then I got pictures. I went and checked trail cameras over the weekend and got pictures of him as recently as that weekend. So he's out there moving around a little bit. And then I talked to a neighbor who saw him moving in daylight one morning, as well as a different mature buck that I've never seen and never gotten pictures of, but he's right there next to us. So that's positive. That's good to see. I think it is condition dependent, though. And I know that's something that we're probably going to talk about or hear about from other folks today in the episode, is that at least what I'm doing right now, I'm here in Montana with you, but as soon as I get home, I'm going to be looking at the weather forecast and trying to plan careful strikes on this property when conditions are right.
Yeah, and until we started doing Rut Radio, once the calendar flipped to December, I never really considered how the weather affected deer movement. I would consider like how really cold weather or snow or wind would affect me as a hunter and like being comfortable out there. But until I heard you and a lot of other guys start talking about warm spells and cold fronts and precipitation come December, I never really considered how that can play a part in a setup for a hunt. And we do hear about that this week, and you just covered it on the meateater.com. So give us a quick overview on like what is good weather and bad weather for late season.
Yeah, so there's this article, I think we titled it something like how late season weather impacts deer movement or something along those lines. The basic gist being, right, at this point in the year, these deer have been hunted for months. They're extremely wary. They're sick and tired of humans, hunters, badgering them all the time. So these deer are reluctant to move, especially mature bucks. So at this time, the way I look at things is that you have to be extra careful about when you go in there and apply hunting pressure, because any mistake you make, and this is true any time of year, but even more so now, given that we're at the end, any mistake you make could turn that buck nocturnal again, could keep him from ever giving you an opportunity. So I wait until the right conditions are present, which would be one of these late season fronts that'll get those deer up on their feet earlier and for longer periods of time. So that's typically going to come in the form of 2 things. Number 1, a significant snow system, when you get a lot of precipitation that covers the ground and it puts deer down for a while. You get this, I don't know how you describe it, but when you've got a strong storm coming, this could be true with a rainstorm or a snowstorm, but heavy precipitation, strong winds, that's going to usually slow movement down for a period of time around that actual event, right? They don't want to be out moving as much in a big blizzard. They're going to bed down through the worst of it. But as soon as it slows up, as soon as it dies down and that high pressure system moves through, usually the cloud cover might break, blue skies, high pressure, colder temperatures, and all that snow is settled, all those deer are all of a sudden on their feet, and there's this latent hunger, right? Haven't been feeding for a while. Now they're hungry. They want to get after it. They want to start accruing some calories. So that's going to get deer up on their feet moving earlier, as well as then the second thing, which hopefully comes with that, which is colder temperatures. If you get a significant cold front, we talk about this all year, right? Cold fronts make a difference, but especially in the late season when you get a super duper Arctic front pushing through where you're dropping down into maybe single digit temperatures or something, you might have that special circumstance where that one old buck in the area finally is like, damn it, I'm moving. It might be an hour before dark. I usually don't like to move till dark, but it's so cold. I'm burning a lot of calories to stay warm. I got to get that food bag on. And you might have this special opportunity when one of those 2 things happen. So that's what I'm watching for. Of course, there's a whole lot of other things like you mentioned, how snow and cold impacts us as hunters, how it might impact your ability to scout. I mean, snow on the ground really changes the game as far as the sign you can see. That's something else to think about. But more than anything, I want to see those weather systems helping me choose the days to get out there and take those last few calculated strikes.
Yeah, all good things to consider, and all things that we'll talk about with our guests this week, who are Byron Horton from the Whitetail Experience in Ohio. Then we go to Oklahoma and talk to Caleb Combs from Stuart Ranch Outfitters. Then we go go to New Hampshire and talk to Brett Joy from Realtree Sea Bucks, and then we end with Josh Sparks in Iowa from Midwest Whitetails.
And Brett Joy, we gotta mention here. You get a double dose of Brett Joy this week because he just had a hell of a hunt. Had some really, I don't know how you describe it, a whole lot of different factors. Many years of work came together, leading to an incredible late season buck over there in New Hampshire. So we're going to hear from him a little bit today as he talks about the activity he's seeing and a little bit of what led to his success. And then tomorrow on the main Wired Hunt episode, you get the deep dive with Brett. I brought him on the main episode of the podcast to go through his story in detail, this 4-year story in detail, break it all down, and how he eventually did kill a mid-December big old mature whitetail buck in the mountains of New Hampshire. I mean, it's a cool story. We talk about that, and then we talk about some other ideas when it comes to late season hunting to help everybody, myself included. I'm still trying to kill my late season buck. To help us all get those final ideas, for the final days. That's where we're at, Spencer. Do you feel at this point in the year any sense of sadness that the season's closing up, or any sense of remorse that it slipped through your fingers and you didn't squeeze every last little bit of juice out of the orange of the hunting season? Or do you feel like you got it all? You soaked it all in? Where are you at right now?
Yeah, I think this year is no different than other ones, that I'm typically not satisfied come mid-December, and then I'm already looking forward to like 2020, 2021. What can I do different? Where can I pick up additional tags? How can I plan better? All that sort of stuff. So I think even if I'd killed 10 bucks this year, all Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett, I'd still be like, damn it, I want it to be next fall right now.
I want more.
Yep.
Well, soon here we're going to do a wrap-up episode on Rut Fresh Radio. Not exactly sure which week we're going to do that, but soon. And I'm going to grill you a little bit more on your year and your thoughts, and mostly just how irritated I am with you for you not whitetail hunting more. But we'll save that for a later date, Spencer.
All right, we'll talk to you then.
So let's do it.
All right, and joining us on the line first is Byron Horton from Whitetail Experience in Ohio. Now, Byron, in Ohio, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
So I would say we're at a solid 2 right now as far as buck activity in Ohio, and that's mainly due to we are at max hunting pressure. We just wrapped up our gun season week, and especially here on the public land we hunt, a lot of drives have occurred, a lot of people in the woods, and it just seems like right now it is a very difficult task to get a buck on the ground.
If you're trying to finish out the season and fill a tag, what are you looking for then on public land to account for that pressure?
Yeah, a couple things you got to consider is actually like rabbit hunting pressure. Rabbit hunters kind of start hitting the timber, the farmland country, and we kind of concentrate on areas that can hold deer late in the year, whether that be southern facing bedding areas, browse, because then they can feed while they're essentially close to bedding, and you're looking for maybe a private food source that's next to a public land that's got the bedding, and so you're trying to intercept those deer. You're looking for the most part for any sort of food source that may be not harvested by a farmer, or in big woods country, it's the clear cuts. Those become very relevant, and we kind of steer towards hunting big woods just due to you don't have the rabbit hunters so much.
How do you find where bucks are now bedding?
Sure, those bucks, they definitely experience some hunting pressure now, and you go from where you possibly have found sheds. We pulled some trail cameras that have been out all archery season, and so we just pulled one the other day that we were actually the only other hunters on camera, and it was on a pretty obvious hunter route into the peak, but it's a section that's way far back in, and if you're going to shoot a deer there, you've got to either have a team or pack a deer out. So that's something we'll key in on. If you do your homework after a fresh snow, tracks can come into play if you've got that skill set. I won't say we're the Joe Elzinger guys of tracking, but that's a skill set we've kind of improved upon over the last few years. So that's something to consider as well.
What would you consider to be ideal weather for deer hunters in December?
Ooh, let's see here. I got to have some sort of a cold front. Actually, we don't have much in the forecast, but give me a cold front, northerly winds, maybe a day that where the temperature starts in the morning and never really climbs high and kind of continually drops once you get into the afternoon through the evening hours. It's scouting and then just timing that drone strike and hope you get lucky, to be honest.
When you're trying to relocate bucks this time of year, are you looking for rubs and scrapes at all?
Rub scrapes, not so much a huge factor. I do know of a few scrapes that kind of popped up what I'll call like late November into December at this point. I'm not so much concerned on that second rut just because our gun season here in Ohio falls right in that first week of December. If I can recall past hunting experiences, I have seen some third rut type action once we kind of get to that first week of January when our muzzleloader season picks up. But yeah, right now I'm not looking at any sort of rut sign in my tactics. It's browse, it's foods, it's snow tracks. That's way more valuable to me, or visual sightings, obviously.
You briefly touched on trail cameras earlier. Where are you running those trail cameras at in mid-December?
So right now, I think 80-90% of our probably 90% of our trail cameras have been pulled. We try to get those out of the woods for that gun week. Now it's a matter of redeploy, and we'll use any sort of late season food source if we can, or two of us have tagged out. We may actually deploy some cameras in some areas that we're kind of curious about for next season. And obviously if those turn up a buck, great. So it's probably a 50-50 split. And like I will use, if I do find late season food sources, occasionally I will go back to scrapes or any sort of like creek crossing, something that really funnels deer. And if I get snow on the ground, that's when I'm going to at least hold at least a camera or two for if that aligns, because I can see what's going on there, and a quality track then allows me to throw that camera on a higher percentage area.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Ohio?
I think this is the toughest time of year. I don't see it, knowing what weather we've got here for the next week. You're still you're still a 2 on public land. We've got 2 weeks till another firearm season picks up. These deer traditionally, based on kind of past experience, they don't really get to daylight active until end of December, starting into January. We do have a muzzleloader season, but there doesn't seem to be as much hunting pressure with that. So this is a tough time, and I'm going to give it a 2 max.
All right, Byron, I hope your pessimism is wrong. Good luck, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Spencer.
All right, and joining us online next is Caleb Combs in Oklahoma from Stuart Ranch Outfitters. Now, Caleb, in Oklahoma, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would say about an 8. This is one of my favorite times to hunt of the year. I like everything pre-rut and post-rut, and so I'm always optimistic about this time of year, but also I went Friday and Sunday, and I saw good bucks both times. Some were still chasing does and heat, and some were back on food sources, it looked like them. I mean, as far as they didn't have any interest in rut activities, it didn't appear to me. But I like the mixture, the combination of both. You can get them a couple different ways this time of year.
As far as food sources go, what should deer hunters in Oklahoma be focused on right now?
Late season, I'm always focused on acorns, whatever's left, specifically red oaks, late season, and then anything green. So that's not dry, not dry forage, but if you can find a good food plot or good agriculture that's still growing, that's preferred to me.
You said that you saw a little bit of chasing the other day. This time of year, do you expect to find any sign making, and have you been seeing any this season?
Yes, I mean, it's still out there. They're definitely still making scrapes. I saw several bucks hitting the same scrape Friday and then last week as well. So I still look at scrapes. I'm just not as focused on them. It's almost always food for me. Food, and then if you just happen to get on the couple hot does that are left. But I kind of move further away from rubs and scrapes. I still watch them. Especially with cameras, I just don't hunt them as hard because I don't expect them to produce that much.
If I would have talked to you a month ago, I know you would have been looking for cold fronts. Are you still looking for cold fronts this time of year, or does weather play less of a factor?
No, I mean, if it's colder, I'll assume they're up and they're eating more. But if it's just not hot, if it's real hot, it's less attractive. But if it's normal temps and lower, then I'm good from there.
With this being one of your favorite times of year to kill a mature buck, where are you running your trail cameras at?
My trail cameras are still, I pretty much leave them on scrapes all year. But then I do leave them on food sources as well. But food sources, I try to leave them the same places all year long. So my cameras don't adjust based on the time of the year. If I need more cameras, I buy more cameras. But I leave them the same places all year long. I'd like to just see the patterns more than the patterns and what I have left year-wise.
In Oklahoma, do you find that there's a shift in bedding come late season?
I would say no, but I hunt a lot of areas of low pressure. I usually try not to go to my places rifle season. I'll skip rifle season half the years, which sounds crazy, half the years. And then I'll just let them move in. But most of our bedding stays the same. It's pretty high population as far as bucks are concerned. So the good bedding areas remain good. They're almost always pretty consistent. They might lay down more in random areas, but through the night. But the key places are always the same.
Are you concerned with moon phases at all this time of year?
I'm not. I don't pay a lot of attention to the moon. I mean, a little bit, not that much. It doesn't usually affect me. If I can go, I go. I'm not gonna not go because of the moon. Weather would be more important, and definitely having food is really important.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Oklahoma?
I'm forever optimistic. So still like 7, 8. If you're on good food sources, if you have food plots that didn't get hammered and you have some food left, I think you'll be very successful.
All right, Caleb, congrats on the great buck this year. Thanks for joining me.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, and joining us on the line next in New Hampshire is Brett Joy from Realtree Sea Bucks. Now, Brett, in New Hampshire, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'd say it's been pretty variable day to day, but probably a 5 or 6. There's a lot of factors going on right now around here. Our gun season actually just ended, so there's been a lot of pressure in the woods the last 6 weeks or so, 5 or 6 weeks. We've got we just had a big snow event. It's been cold, then we got rain. Food sources are changing, and you have some late rut activity occurring as well. So there's just kind of a mixed bag of different factors that is really affecting that activity. I'd say overall it's pretty decent. Nothing like it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, but it's pretty good. I mean, you can definitely have some luck out there. There's some bucks moving around daylight. It really depends on your situation and where you're hunting and what the food source is, if there's late does or, whatever. So there's a lot that goes into it, but I'd say overall it's pretty good.
You just killed a big mature buck on Saturday. Tell us a little bit about that setup.
Yeah, so that was an interesting one. It was a deer I've been after for a number of years and was after really hard during the rut. And he actually shifted into an area I believe that he was in because it's preferable wintering habitat. It gets pretty cold up here and we have a lot of snow, or had a lot of snow. It's melting now, but he kind of moved into an area where I think there's some good browse, good thermal cover. It's a little more protected area. And I know there's a number of does in there, so he was kind of hanging out down there. I was lucky enough to get a blanket of fresh snow and went in to check some cameras and actually had walked by my camera, after that snow a couple hours before. So I had his fresh track, had plenty of mountainous stuff and big woods to chase him in. So got on his track and took me about 4 miles in 5 hours, but I ended up catching up with him and killing him.
Is that a common tactic for you this time of year?
For me, it's semi-common. For this area, it's very common. It's probably the most effective tactic for a late season that you can have. Whenever you have an opportunity to track and you get fresh snow in New Hampshire, or Maine, or Vermont, or really in the Northeast of the big woods, you can be really effective. Tracking down these bucks if you have sort of an idea of what you're doing. You can at least be in the game, whereas you may not be if you don't have that snow. So yeah, I would say it's pretty common.
You talked about how that buck had moved into a sort of wintering range. Tell us a little bit more about what you're looking for in bedding in mid-December.
Yeah, so the number one thing is low pressure. So areas that haven't had a lot of pressure in the big woods, it may not be as big a factor if there's not much pressure. If you're maybe in the suburban type area, a lot of times they'll actually hang out in protected areas like with no hunting, or even in like behind neighborhoods, stuff like that. But as far as habitat goes, good browse is big. If there hasn't been much mass crop. So areas that have been logged, obviously, early succession growth, that type of thing. And then obviously mass crop, acorns and apples are a big factor still. There's still some left on the ground if you're in areas heavy with those types of trees. And the last thing is really conifers. So that's a huge deal in the Northeast, especially in New Hampshire. These wintering habitats are critical for the deer. So, if you can find a stand of mature spruce or firs or white pine or really hemlock is the biggest one. Those deer really start to gravitate towards those areas because it gives them great thermal cover. The snow depths aren't as deep, and they actually do browse on that stuff pretty heavily because we just don't really have much for quality food sources this time of year.
Back real quick to tracking a buck through the snow. At what point do you give up on a set of tracks?
I would say when he goes into an area you can't hunt, which most of the time that doesn't happen if you're tracking because you usually are trying to track in areas where you have thousands of acres to roam. I'd say it gets dark or you kill them. Would be the things. I mean, you can really when it comes to tracking, and I'm not an expert tracker by any means. I'd say I'm, like I said, enough to be maybe be a little dangerous, but all the expert trackers that I've talked to all say persistence is what gets it done. Just staying on that track. I know. For example, I talked to my buddy who filmed Hal Blood, who's a very well-known tracker in Maine, and he actually tracked a buck 2 different days, tracked him all day one day for a number of miles, and then got on that buck the next morning and tracked him the whole rest of the day and ended up killing him. And he bumped him, a handful, half dozen times in those 2 days. So persistence is deadly when it comes to tracking.
And are you sometimes tracking a group of deer, or is it often where you're just tracking a single buck?
It's much more challenging when you're tracking a group of deer, especially if snow conditions aren't ideal. It can be confusing trying to figure out what track you're on and keeping track. Actually, on Saturday when I tracked my buck, he was on with some does or was following some doe tracks and actually lost his track for a period of time and had to backtrack and see where he left. So it could be more challenging. I think the best scenario is a buck by himself. If it's maybe his done chasing does and is maybe looking to bed or just browse around, that's probably the best situation. It's really difficult when they're on the move looking for does and covering a lot of ground or with does chasing them. So, and then when you finally get up to the animal, if he's with 3 or 4 does, there's that much more chance you're going to get busted before you get a shot at the buck you're after.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in New Hampshire?
I'd say it's probably going to stay pretty consistent, maybe a 5 or 6. You're going to see flurries of good activity some days, depending on, like I said, all those factors based on pressure, food, weather, and some late does or maybe even early, yearlings coming in. So I'd say it's going to stay pretty good. Definitely a good time to be in the woods and keep at it. Our rifle season's over, but we have another week of bow season. So I think it's definitely worth, spending some time if you have it.
All right, Brett, well, congrats again on the awesome deer. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks, Spencer.
All right, and joining us on the line next from Iowa is Josh Sparks with Midwest Whitetails. Now, Josh, in Iowa, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to go with a 5. I'm just going to attribute that to the fact that we've got some colder temperatures than we had the previous few weeks. So if you're hunting over food, that's what we did on the tail end of the bow season. We had some pretty good encounters. Ended up seeing on our last hunt of the year 4 different mature bucks, but the upcoming weather not looking so great. So,
referencing that weather, what kind of weather is ideal this time of year?
Particularly where we're at, we're hoping to get some snow. Just forcing the deer to feed a little bit more concentrated than they are right now. If we can get a couple inches of snow, it'll really force these deer to go to the corn that we've got on this particular property. There are some standing beans, but more or less there's just so much browse And when we don't have that snow, it's hard to concentrate them down to those particular spots.
Do you notice a shift in the bedding for bucks in Iowa this time of year?
Yeah, at least, again, referencing this farm, we started to notice a lot more south-facing ridge bedding, particularly just to stay out of those cold north winds. And on this farm, there's a lot of CRP in those south-facing slopes, so it just offers good thermal cover. It's kind of a shift more or less from the hardwoods to those areas is what we see down here.
I know you're just out checking trail cameras. Where are your cameras focused at in early December?
For right now, so what I've been doing today is actually moving them around. And we're taking most of them off of all the scrapes that we had, October, November, and we're putting them on mostly on trails going out to these fields I was just talking about. The biggest thing we're trying to figure out is where they're entering the food plots, and then kind of basing that with where we should set up the blinds or if we need to hang a stand.
Did any of those scrapes have some recent activity?
Yeah, no. When I was checking them today, I mean, it's definitely, not like it was in November, but there are some younger bucks and does. And then one of the bucks that we are hunting was on a scrape, but it's not nearly as frequent for sure.
How do you account for gun hunting pressure in a state like Iowa?
For Iowa, I think that's a pretty selective answer. Right where I'm at, gun hunting is pretty minimal. Most of the guys around here are waiting for the late muzzleloader seasons. But I do know quite a few buddies that do face the shotgun pressure dilemma. A lot of their deer, getting ran because you can party hunt in Iowa, so that's a pretty popular thing with pushing deer. So I think it can definitely be impactful. There's no doubt. But if you do have a farm where you don't pressure it, I think you can also, pick up some deer from around your neighbors if they know that they're not going to get ran out on that piece of property.
You mentioned that there's still some standing beans around earlier. A lot of the Midwest had a late harvest this year, but are you seeing that there's still a lot of standing crops in Iowa?
Generally speaking, no. From what I've seen, most of everything's gotten taken out. Any standing food now, I would assume, is purposeful for the use of, food plots and hunting. Most of the guys that I know that are farmers were able to get everything out. It was late for sure, but they were able to get it done.
Have you been seeing any secondary rutting?
Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned, when we sat that last day, it would have been December 5th, I believe, we did see two of those mature bucks were bumping the does that were in the plot. The does definitely were not having anything to do with it, and the bucks gave up pretty easily. But I think, looking for that last doe is definitely still on their mind. And, that's the biggest thing, too. We were thinking, concentrate around food. Maybe we do get that last hot doe. And if we don't, at least the bucks will be thinking the same thing.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Iowa?
On a scale of 1 to 10 in Iowa, we do have some pretty cold temps. Obviously, if you're shotgun hunting, who knows what it's going to be like. You're going to be driving everything around there. But I would say generally still around that 4 to 5 mark. If you're, hunting over food, you've got a good shot. But really, really looking forward to having some snow on the ground, hopefully, within the next month.
All right, Josh, well, I hope you get that weather you're looking for. Good luck, and thanks for joining me.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.